living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
Many of us appreciate the occasional glass of wine with dinner or like to crack open a beer with friends. But did you know that as we age, the effect alcohol has on our bodies changes? And while some moderate drinking can have health benefits, depending on your particular health conditions or the medications you're taking, alcohol may pose some serious risks. Welcome to Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm your host, Beth Brown. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Joining us today is Dr. Douglas Kunzweiler to talk about the effects alcohol can have on our health, especially as we get older. Thank you for being here, Dr. Kunzweiler.
Thank you for asking.
So as we age, alcohol starts to have a different effect on us than when we were younger. Can you just first start out by saying, why does that happen?
Well, everything about our bodies changes as we age. Our body composition changes, and we have less body water than we do when we're younger. And that means that drinking the same amount of alcohol concentrates it more. So you'll actually have a higher blood alcohol level than you would when you were younger. Some of the other things that happen is that our body processes it more slowly. Alcohol is metabolized primarily in our liver, and as we get older, like the rest of our organs, our liver doesn't function as well. And so it doesn't process it as quickly.
Okay, so alcohol stays in our bodies longer when we're older?
Yes.
Okay, and are there other contributors besides age that might also affect us as we get older?
Yeah, there are all sorts of chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, liver disease, that also can affect how our body processes it. Our body composition changes in other ways. We tend to have less fatty tissue as we get older, and again, that concentrates the alcohol. And so there are a number of reasons why. Okay,
and gender, is that one that plays a role too?
Yeah, women tend to have less body water as they get older than men, and so women are more susceptible to alcohol. It rises faster in their bloodstream than it does in men.
Okay, so we're talking about blood alcohol concentration or content, or BAC. At what point does our BAC, or at what level does our BAC start affecting how we function normally?
Well, as soon as you start consuming alcohol, it has an effect. At low levels, it produces a sense of euphoria, increases sociability, lowers anxiety. But then as the levels continue to rise, it begins to affect our coordination, our reflexes, our vision, our balance, our thinking ability, pretty much everything. So it begins right away, though. As soon as you begin drinking, there's an effect.
Okay, and if someone starts to feel the effect of alcohol, for example, I've heard people drink black coffee to try to get the alcohol out of their system faster. Does that work? Do things like that work?
No. No, there's no way to reduce the effect of alcohol. You simply have to wait for the body to metabolize it, that is, to burn it off. So things like going on oxygen or taking a cold shower or drinking coffee really don't have any effect on that.
Okay. So there are some studies out there that talk about the health benefits of moderate drinking. So can we start out first by, what does that mean, moderate drinking?
Moderate drinking is considered to be 1 drink per day for women under the age of 65, 2 drinks per day for men under the age of 65. Over the age of 65, moderate drinking is considered to be 1 drink per day. And a drink means a 12-ounce beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of hard liquor.
Okay, so depending on the type of alcohol, 1 drink is different.
Yes.
So if people are reporting to their doctors, if everyone has their physicals and they ask, do you drink, how much do you drink, they should know what 1 drink really means.
Yes. My father reassured me that his cardiologist told him that he could have a glass of wine a day. And so he would take a 16-ounce tumbler and fill it up to the brim. So that's cheating.
Okay. Okay.
12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, an ounce and a half of hard liquor is considered a drink.
Okay, so if we have one drink a day, that's moderate drinking. There was a 29-year study in California that found moderate drinking among older adults actually helped with their memory. What's the connection between alcohol and your brain?
Well, all the effects of alcohol are not well understood, but it appears that it does enhance some proteins and other chemicals in the brain. But you have to remember that that is offset by the bad effects of alcohol. And so you will see studies from time to time that show that alcohol does have some good effects, but in the long run, it's really not that good for you.
Okay, so you talked about your dad
Yeah.
and his heart, and I've heard too that wine can help your heart. Can you talk a little bit about the connection between wine and your heart health?
Well, red wine contains some compounds that increase HDL. HDL is the good cholesterol. It actually carries cholesterol from our blood vessels back to the liver to be metabolized. So increasing our HDL is a good thing, and red wine does help with that. It also seems to reduce clotting, and that's thought to be helpful for the heart, and it makes our blood vessels a little more flexible. But again, you have to remember that's at moderate doses.
Okay, and you mentioned too that alcohol also has its risks. So when we talk about benefits of moderate drinking versus the risks, would you recommend folks start drinking at a moderate level if they don't drink already to try to get some of those health benefits?
No.
Okay.
No, the risk to benefit ratio is weighted very heavily against drinking alcohol. If you enjoy alcohol, we think drinking at a low or moderate amount is okay. But there's no reason to start if you don't drink now.
Okay, so if you do drink, do it moderately.
Yes.
And we do need to take a break, so thank you for that. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the potential risks that Dr. Kunzweiler already mentioned about alcohol, especially with certain health conditions. And we'll also talk about medications that definitely do not mix when it comes to alcohol. We still have a lot to talk about. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're still talking with Dr. Douglas Kunzweiler about how alcohol can impact your health, and we're now going to dive into some common health conditions older folks may have that could be complicated by drinking alcohol. So thanks for staying with us. So let's start with heart conditions. When it comes to your heart health, are there things or are there people who definitely should not be drinking alcohol?
Yes. People that have high blood pressure, alcohol can make that worse. People who have had heart attacks or stroke should not, because it can make those conditions more likely or make them worse. People who have had problems with their heart rhythm, like atrial fibrillation is a very common one, and alcohol can make that worse. So there are a number of conditions, and my advice is to talk it over with your doctor if you've had any kind of heart trouble.
Perfect. And so what exactly does alcohol do to your heart that it would have that effect on some of those health conditions?
Well, one thing it does is it raises your blood pressure if you drink over a long period of time. And that means that your heart has to work harder to pump against that higher pressure. It also affects heart muscle directly, and it can make it so that your heart muscle doesn't contract as efficiently as it should, and so it can make things like congestive heart failure worse.
Okay, let's talk about diabetes. That's on the rise, especially among older adults. Can you talk a little bit about the effect or the risks that alcohol might have on folks with diabetes?
Yes, blood sugar is largely regulated by the liver, and alcohol, we know, is a toxin for the liver, and so it makes it harder for the body to manufacture and to control sugars that are in the bloodstream. So also alcohol is basically empty calories, and so it interferes with your total calorie intake, and that interferes with your diabetic control.
Okay, so what's your advice for folks with diabetes when it comes to drinking?
Well, ultimately probably don't drink, but if you do, drink in moderation if you're going to drink, then you're going to need to watch your blood sugars more carefully, maybe test yourself more often than you normally would. You should not drink on an empty stomach, particularly if you're on medications for diabetes, because then you can have troubles with low blood sugar.
Okay. And you mentioned the liver several times. So what about those folks who have liver disease or liver problems? What are the risks there?
Yeah, alcohol definitely is harmful to the liver. We know that it damages liver cells, and when they're damaged, they're replaced by scar tissue. And when the liver becomes full of scar tissue, then it doesn't process things properly, and that leads to a condition called cirrhosis of the liver. That's a bad situation.
Okay. Does alcohol cause cancer?
We know from studies that alcohol is associated with an increased risk of certain cancers, especially head and neck cancers, cancers of the mouth and of the throat. But it's also been associated with breast cancer, cancer of the colon.
Do we know why?
Not really. We know that alcohol is a toxin to lots of different cells, so it damages cells, it damages their DNA, and we think that in the repair of those, sometimes things go wrong, and it winds up producing cancerous cells.
Okay. If someone is concerned about some of the risks that alcohol might be having on their health, if they stop drinking, do those risks go away?
It's much like smoking. The risks don't go away completely, but they improve as soon as you stop. So the take-home message is that it's never too late to stop or cut back your drinking.
Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about medications a little bit. Whether they're prescription medications or over-the-counter medications, there are certain medicines that people are taking that could pose risks when it comes to alcohol. Can you talk about maybe what some of those medications are?
Well, particularly talking about prescription medications, alcohol is a depressant, and in combination with things like pain medications, like narcotics, and medicines like the anxiety drugs, like the benzodiazepines, and that's medicines like Valium and Ativan, it enhances the effect of those medicines, and so it can put your brain to sleep and make you stop breathing, for instance, if you take too much. So it can make the medicines that you're taking a lot more potent.
Okay, so if someone is taking either over-the-counter meds for something or a prescribed medication, should they be especially careful about drinking, and if so, what does that mean?
Yes, they should. And the best thing is to talk to your doctor and ask for their advice. A lot of the over-counter medicines have a small amount of alcohol in them, especially the cough and cold remedies. So you could also ask a pharmacist about that. But in general, any of the medicines that are associated with drowsiness are going to be worse if you take alcohol along with them.
Okay, so you mentioned cough syrup has alcohol in it. Are there other ingredients that people should look out for in their medications?
Yes, if you're taking anything that has an antihistamine in it, like Benadryl, for instance, that also contributes to drowsiness, and alcohol will enhance that effect.
Okay, so we just have a little bit of time left here, Dr. Kunzweiler. So can you just finish off by saying, what is your general advice for patients when it comes to drinking alcohol?
Well, human beings have been drinking alcohol for 10,000 years that we know of, and it's ingrained in society. But my advice is that if you don't drink now, there's no reason to start. If you do drink, drink in moderation. Talk to your provider about your use of alcohol and be honest when you talk to them about it.
Great, and that seems to be something you've said a lot today. Talk to your doctor, so good advice. Thank you very much for all your time. Coming up next, recent studies show alcohol abuse is on the rise with Americans 65 years of age and older, but alcohol abuse is often missed among older populations. Do you know someone who might be drinking more than they should? We'll talk about what to look for and what you can do right after these messages. Stay with us. Thanks thanks for staying with us. Joining us now is Craig Struble, a licensed clinical social worker and licensed addictions counselor, to talk about how to identify alcohol abuse in older adults, especially because alcoholism among our elders is greatly underestimated and symptoms can be missed. Thanks for being here, Craig.
My pleasure.
So sometimes an older person has trouble with alcohol, but their doctors, their friends, their family, they miss those symptoms. Can you start out by just telling us a little bit about why it's missed among older adults?
Well, I think most commonly it's because that's not what they would be looking for. Oftentimes with older adults, some of those symptoms are similar to things that you would expect in older adults. Things like memory loss, more bruising because they're slipping and falling. Common things that you would expect older adults to be experiencing because of aging, and you wouldn't necessarily think of them as a symptom of problems with alcohol.
Okay, and so you mentioned a few of those symptoms, but there are other warning signs that we might want to look out to. Can you talk about a couple of those?
Well, in the addictions field, we're going to look to see if there's a substance use issue is going to stem from behavioral changes that you see and what might have triggered those behavioral symptoms. So, you know, things that you have to combine everything together really to make that kind of a decision. Okay. So knowing if a person has become more isolated, lost interest in activities that they used to do, those type of things are as much of a tell about possible substance use issues, whether it's alcohol or other substances, as it is that, you know, they've got unexplainable bruising or they're losing their memory. You would want to combine those symptomologies to make a determination.
Okay, so physical, emotional, maybe, and then social, that they're becoming more isolated.
Especially, and in the older population, that's a common thing, right? Their peer groups are getting older and people pass away, and so their friendships lessen. Their ability to get to things is impaired sometimes by aging, and all those things play a part.
Okay, are there other situations or factors that might put an older person more at risk of developing a dependence on alcohol?
There's different, certainly there's different things that come into play. One of the biggest things to look at if you're observing it from the outside would be things such as there's the potential for there to be an early onset with alcoholism or a late onset. Early onset would be somebody who had experienced maybe issues with drinking at an earlier age, like in their 20s or 30s. So it's been kind of a lifelong type process with them. Late onset would be somebody who experienced something maybe later in life, loss of a loved one, something like that, and that's when their drinking picked up. I think that's something to be aware of if you're a loved one and you're observing potential problems with your loved one, something to put together.
How much is too much? Is there a certain amount of drinking that should throw up a red flag for folks?
Well, yes. The big catch, though, is that each individual is different. So what might be the standard might not apply. Typically, if you're not on medications, they say that you could take up to 3 drinks in any given day would be okay, but not more than 7 drinks in a week. If you're going above and beyond that, there's potential for there to be issues with what your use levels are.
If there are folks watching that are noticing these things, drinking a little too much or isolation, do they confront that person or how do they handle that situation?
Again, I think that it's different for everybody. Depends on what your relationship is with that person. Depends on where that person is with an understanding of there being a potential problem. I think it's always best to have that conversation with the person, to start to engage them in a conversation about, is your use problematic? Not necessarily making them become defensive and saying, you're an alcoholic, but is your use problematic? But each person is different, and if as a loved one you don't feel like you can approach that person, it is best to talk to somebody who has experience working with that population so that you can best help them work through whatever it is. And it might not be, alcoholism might not be the problem. Oftentimes, there's a co-occurring issue. It's kind of the chicken and the egg thing. Does depression cause a person to be an alcoholic, or does alcoholism cause a person to be a depression? It's probably a combination of both. So maybe it's a person needs grief and loss counseling versus substance use treatment. But you have to be able to put that person as a whole person, not separating them out, in order to make that decision.
That is a good distinction to make there, to keep it as the whole person. Mm-hmm. If it is a substance use issue, though, what are the treatment options that are available? So
there's different things, and I think of there's treatment options and there's therapeutic options. AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, is a good therapeutic option for people. It's not treatment, but it's a good fellowship of people who might have similar problems, have struggled with alcoholism in the past, that can help people work through that, that's not treatment-based. There's also treatment providers, anywhere from outpatient, which would be anything from meeting with somebody 1 day a week to meeting with in a group for 3 hours a week. To there are inpatient facilities as well that would be a 24-hour program where you would stay in a place over a period of time, anywhere between 14 to sometimes 60 days, depending on what the facility is and what the fiscal abilities are of the person, that can also help with that. And there's sober living houses, stuff like that as well.
Okay, we're just about out of time, but just really quickly, for those older folks who are on fixed incomes, is there financial help for them to get treatment?
There is. Medicare will pay for certain aspects of treatment. They will pay for, depending on which Medicare program you're on, will pay for certain things. The federal government has also given states money towards substance use. Each state has their own ability to do that. In Montana, there are state-approved agencies who have a CD block grant to help people that are low income or don't have a way to pay to cover those expenses.
That's great. Okay, Craig, thank you so much for your time and all that information. We are out of time. We hope you'll come back again next week. Until then, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life. Have a great week.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the YouTube icon. Special thanks to Fire Tower Coffee House and Roasters. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.